Hello, NBA fans, and welcome back to another episode of the NBA The Week That Was. Today, we will be continuing the good, the bad, and the ugly series here on the NBA The Week That Was. However, I would also like to mention how excited I am that the NBA is restarting. On July 31st, the season will resume with 22 teams in Orlando. There are great articles on ESPN and Bleacher Report for you guys to check out in case you want to learn more about this new format. However, even if the teams that are in the tournament have not been covered by me, I will still be covering them based on how they played in the regular season that was going before the COVID-19 pandemic happened. So without further ado, let's get right into the fourth episode of the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly series here on the NBA The Week That Was. In today's episode, I'll be covering the Charlotte Hornets and what went well for them this year and what really needs to be worked on moving forward. For the past few years, Charlotte's really been a at best mediocre team. In 2015, they made the playoffs, but since then they've been at best mediocre. But over the last 2 years, one of the worst teams of the league. Besides Kemba Walker, they were really unable to build a good team around him. They tried to sign Nick Batum, overpaid him, Tyler Zeller, just Frank Kaminsky. They just weren't able to build a good team around Kemba Walker, who was a definite first option. This year, Kemba really realized that even though he wanted to stay loyal to Charlotte, if he wants to do well in his NBA career, he really needs to leave and head up north to Boston, who could really provide him with a good place to succeed in the NBA. So with Kemba Walker departing, they really didn't have a good year this year. However, there were one or two things here or there that were good positives for Charlotte moving forward. Let me cover those first. I really want to focus on the development of Devonte Graham, their 6'1" point guard. Last year, Devonte Graham averaged 3 to 4 points. He was a fringe bench player, would occasionally play in the G League as well. However, this year, with an absence of that true number one option that Kemba was, he really emerged as a stand-in option until Charlotte can find their true star moving forward. Graham averaged around 18 points and 7 assists while shooting a really good percentage from 3 and being consistent at it. He was a good 3-point shooter and a great playmaker. He was even invited to the 3-point contest. So he really emerged, as a most improved player candidate and someone that really carried the load of the Charlotte offense this year given the lack of other options around him. With Graham, moving forward, if they can find that true star that they desperately need, he can be a solid second or third option moving forward in the future. He's a good playmaker, as I said. He's a great shooter. He's a good complemental player to stars. However, Devonte Graham cannot be the star of your team if you want to succeed. He's a great player, but obviously there's stars, then there's great players. So you see what I mean. You need a definitive first option. Devonte Graham can be your second option, but this year he really had to be the first option, which isn't ideal for Charlotte, but definitely helped them this year. Honestly, if I had to point out one other thing that really was a positive for Charlotte was some developmental pieces that they have acquired or drafted. PJ Washington was a great pick. He's a bouncy power forward who can really score the ball well and was great on defense. Same with Miles Bridges. He continued his development from being a great athletic player to, rounding out his offensive game. And Malik Monk, also typically just a great 3-point shooter, is really rounding out his offensive game. So with the lack of a first option, a young team can really develop their players so they can, just get better until that star gets there, and then they have a good solid roster around him. So that in that sense, Charlotte had a good year to, gain experience for their young players, but overall, it wasn't really a good year for Charlotte. As I mentioned before, Charlotte was one of the worst teams in the league this year. Despite having a league average defense due to stingy young players like Miles Bridges and PJ Washington, their offense was by far the worst in the NBA. Worse than the Hawks, the Knicks, just all the other teams that were bad. Charlotte was just worse on offense because they really didn't have that first option. Like I said, Devonte Graham was there, but they needed a replacement for Kemba Walker. They tried to do that through the Boston point guard Terry Rozier, who really was only good with one playoff run in 2018 where he averaged 20 points, but this year he was just horribly he was not efficient at all. He just took up way too many bad shots, just wasn't a good player. So Charlotte's offense really, really struggled this year. And it makes sense, they're a young team. They have no experience. They have no definitive first option, a new head coach. It just wasn't a year for Charlotte to be good because They needed the experience. They needed the veteran experience. They needed the veterans to be there. They needed the stars to be there. They had none of that, so you couldn't really expect much from Charlotte this year. However, they with their low expectations, honestly on offense, it was even worse. We thought that maybe Terry Rozier, could average 20, 22 points, have a breakout year. He averaged 16, was useless. Nick Batum never lived up to that massive contract he got in that horrible offseason of 2016. Tyler Zeller, bad player. Same with Frank Kaminsky, thought to be a really good stretch big, but he's not going to cut it for the Hornets. And then other players, Miles Bridges is developing. Same with Malik Monk. Same with PJ Washington. So it really just wasn't a good year for Charlotte offensive-wise. They also struggled on rebounding, giving their, lack of experience, lack of veteran big men. I don't know. It was just a really bad year for Charlotte just because of their lack of experience. Their head coach wasn't good. It just wasn't a good year for Charlotte. However, I really hold hopes for them because if they have another bad year after this year, they're going to have a good draft pick this year. Next year, they're going to get another draft pick. Hopefully, those draft picks can entice better free agents than Terry Rozier to come to Charlotte. They're never really going to get that star unless they find it through the draft because Charlotte isn't a big market. They're not going to sign one in free agency. However, they can really build a solid roster, play team basketball, become a team like that, the Detroit Pistons of 2004. Just play team basketball. That's how Charlotte's eventually going to become successful. So they're taking the right steps. They've acquired good steals in the draft like PJ Washington, Miles Bridges. However, if they can acquire that one star through the draft, develop their young players, it's going to take time. But Charlotte has the potential to, get to the next step, making the playoffs and eventually becoming contenders from the East. And with that, we wrap up the 4th episode of the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly series here on the NBA, the week that was. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like down below, and if you're new on this channel, don't forget to subscribe as well. As always, if you have any feedback for me, please feel free to leave it in the comments below, and I'll catch you guys on the next episode of the NBA, the week that was.